some of the ones that are top of mind recently at our firm have centered around legislation and regulation. And specifically, as more and more techniques involve artificial intelligence, as well as live programmed biotherapeutic products, the question then becomes, are our current regulatory frameworks sufficient for enabling these new therapies and treatment modalities? And that question remains to be seen, but I think that, a great example of how fast we can move has been our response to this pandemic. There's no reason why we can't move this fast when developing many other assets in the therapeutic realm, other than the regulatory hurdles that need to be overcome in the development of a therapy. And so I think that regulatory change as well as guidance is a big shortcoming or gap right now. And the hope is, now that the world is focused on science and really has been for the last year because of the pandemic, that we're going to see systemic change in both early scientific funding as well as enablement of unique regulatory frameworks and processes for these types of assets. Those could include things like N-of-1 trials that we're starting to see, particularly among a decent swath of rare disease therapies that are coming onto the market. I think too, on the legislation side of things, something that we're going to see coming out of the place that we are today is continued America First focus on the supply chain. So the supply chain is obviously an issue, and we've seen what a exacerbated supply chain can do to the world, both on non-medical stuff like chips right now, as well as on the medical side of things, whether it be, vaccines or PCR testing or other things like that. And I think that understanding and enabling those supply chains with new companies that figure out ways in which to safely and effectively manufacture and distribute the types of therapies and diagnostics that I think we're able to make today is going to have to be a legislative priority. And so again, that plays into both legislation and regulation for us. And then the last thing is, because of how fast therapies are able to be developed and the amount of money within the therapeutic realm right now, clinical trial management is becoming difficult, particularly in areas of intensive interest like immunotherapy and cancer. I think if you look at, let's call it PD-1 trials, when it's PD-1 plus X or PD-1 plus Y or a different regimen, there's over 1,000 of those out there. Well, there's only so many cancer patients and so many academic centers that can run these trials. And so whether it be new versions of clinical trial sort of frameworks that exist, like virtual clinical trials or pushing clinical trials out to community medical centers is something that we can think about, or really the global nature of science. So now that these tools are democratized and regulatory frameworks are well known, at least, we should be able to run clinical trials ex-US or outside of the US to accelerate US-based biotherapeutic development. And so again, that's going to require buy-in at the national governmental level. But it's something that we think about a lot as a shortcoming right now, or at least a road bump or a speed bump in the current acceleration of life sciences innovation.